So it's 8 p.m. That means it's also 3 p.m. over on Eastern Standard Time and midday in Pacific Standard Time. If you are joining us from anywhere across the planet, you are most welcome. Welcome to Pock and Rob's first ever live stream. This is to celebrate the fact that we hit 100 subscribers just before Christmas. And I am delighted to say that is already ridiculously out of date, as in the last 6 weeks since that happened, another 50 people have subscribed to the channel, which is amazing. Which means I need to start thinking about what I might do when I hit maybe 250 subscribers. Maybe tier listing all of the 1970s #1 hit singles. Who knows? But thank you all for joining us. Please do use the comments and argue with me when I trash a song you love or absolutely adore a song you detest. Do tell me. It will be. I will do my best to keep a track of as many of the comments as possible. So we're going to kick off, and this starts off with the Pretenders' "Brass in Pocket," which reached #1 on the 19th of January 1980 for 2 weeks. Up to that point, the first #1 of the 80s was actually the last #1 of the 70s because of the whole Christmas period. That was Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. In case you're wondering where I would be putting Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, it would absolutely be in Outstanding because it's a cracking song. But now let's kick off with "Brass in Pocket," 2 weeks at #1. And for me, I'll just explain my tier listing system. I've got outstanding songs which I think are absolutely incredible and either iconic or just perfect. Then we've got a listing from A through to E. A would be fantastic songs. E are songs that I don't particularly like or are somewhat boring. If they happen to be on the radio, I will probably put up with them. Which leads to the final category of travesty, which is an appalling song that should never have seen a #1 position. And I will actually change radio stations if I'm out and this comes on. There are a few in the 80s, and some years have more travesties than others. But kicking off with 1980s, "Brass in Pocket" by the Pretenders, and I've placed that in C tier. It's right slap bang in the middle. There are times when I really like the song and times when I'm fed up with it, and that's a perfect example of a C song. There's something about Chrissie Hynde's vocals that they get on my wick a little bit from time to time. I used to have a best of the Pretenders. I don't own it anymore because her voice can grate for me. Next one up is the Special AKA with "Too Much Too Young" on the Special AKA live EP. I really quite like that song, but about the same amount as "Brass in Pocket." It's a good song. I like the Specials enough, just not massively so. Then we come to Kenny Rogers and "Coward of the County." And this is the first song that I am putting in Outstanding. I love "Coward of the County." I love playing it and singing it on my guitar. I love the story of the song, even though it's really dark and horrible. What can I say? I like country. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know I've already said before I quite like my country music, and my dad did as well. And this harks back to listening to this in the car with my dad. I love "Coward of the County." I always did, even when I was 6 years old when it came out. Next track is "Atomic" by Blondie, which I personally think is Blondie's best song and best single. And I really like Blondie, so it can only join Kenny Rogers in "Coward of the County" at the outstanding level. Next track is Fern Kinney's "Together We Are Beautiful." And I'm going to put this, it's kind of hovering there right on the middle between D and E, but I quite like the song, so it's not, it's just about D, but it's right at the very end of D. The next one is "The Jam." So I don't know who's watching. I don't know if Matt, you're watching or not, but you're probably going to wonder, where am I going to put "The Jam"? If you're watching this later on, Matt, you'd be annoyed, I suspect, if I didn't put "Going Underground" in S tier. And I have to admit, I was going to put it in A tier, and the more I thought about it, it's such a powerful song, powerful track. It is S tier. So, Matt, if you're watching or watching back later, you'll be delighted to know the Jam. Going Underground, I put it into outstanding. The next one is the most boring sleeve so far, because I haven't got a sleeve from using Wikipedia, and that is Working My Way Back to You Girl by the Detroit Spinners. And it's probably high E. It's not something I choose to listen to. Don't dislike it. Don't hate it. We're back with Blondie again from the American Gigolo soundtrack. Call Me. Blondie's second number one of the 1980s, or of the exact same year of 1980. Call Me is not my favourite Blondie track. I'm putting it in B tier. Good though. Next we have Gino and Dexys Midnight Runners. And this for me, it's also solid B. Apologies for going through these really quick. I'm going to take a look and see if there's any comments around about the end of each year mark. But I am conscious that there's 190 tracks on this to actually be sticking into this tier list. Next we've got a Eurovision winner, and it's Ireland's Johnny Logan with What's Another Year. This is... it's D tier, but like Fern Kinney, it's right at the bottom end of D tier. I've actually got this on a compilation CD I made of Eurovision songs, so I like it enough to listen to it occasionally. It is what it is. It's a Eurovision ballad. The next is Suicide is Painless, the theme from MASH, by The MASH. So if you don't know, this piece of music was written by Robert Altman, who directed the film MASH, by his son. And apparently, as a result of it then becoming a hit single nearly 10 years later, this has made more money than, or should have made more money for Robert Altman's son than Robert Altman ever got paid for MASH. It's a great tune, but I don't particularly love the lyrics. I put it in C. Next one is Don McLean and Crying. Crying is an outstanding song, but it is a cover. And if you've watched videos of me ranking singles before, you'll know that I tend to treat a cover with a little bit more marked down. It has to be stupendous, and Crying is not a stupendous cover. It's good, it's enjoyable, because the song, the Roy Orbison song, is just practically unbreakable. But I put it in D tier. I'm not intending ranking within my rankings here, but it would be above the other two. Next we come to ELO and Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu. This was ELO's sole number one, and I don't particularly like it. There's something about ELO and Jeff Lynne's production that tends to annoy me a little bit. It's going in E tier. Our next track, we're still in 1980. 1980 has got quite a lot of songs that reached number one that year. Is Odyssey, Use It Up and Wear It Out. It's one of those tracks that when I hear it, I don't turn off the radio, but I don't like it very much. It's E. Next we've got ABBA, The Winner Takes It All. It's ABBA, it's one of ABBA's greatest songs, certainly one of their greatest singles, and quite possibly for me, their best number one. It can only go in the outstanding tier. We're still lacking any A's or travesties at the moment, and we're staying that way because the next track is Ashes to Ashes. Ashes to Ashes is a top 100 track of all time for me. It's an outstanding, easy outstanding pick. Moving on now to the Jam again, and it's Start. Start is absolutely great song, but it is quite obviously nicked from the Beatles' Taxman. And I enjoy listening to it. I don't like it as much as Going Underground, but it's the first A tier. That is still a phenomenal song. Kelly Marie, Feels Like I'm in Love comes next. With that boo 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 boo. That song is basically famous for, and it's one of these D tier songs. I enjoy it when I hear it, but I don't seek it out. Next, we have the biggest selling single of 1980, which was "Don't Stand So Close to Me" by The Police, and it's perfect. It's an absolutely perfect song. Has to go in outstanding. So we've had 6 outstanding songs so far from 1980, and we're not done with 1980 yet, because the next one is Barbra Streisand, "Woman in Love," which was written by the Bee Gees. It really does sound like it when you hear it. I don't particularly like it. It's an E. And then third number one of the year for Blondie with "The Tide Is High," and it's a cover. It was later again covered and got to number one again by the Atomic Kitten. I'd rather have Blondie's version. It's can't go above D because I think it's one of their weaker singles. Next we have ABBA and "Super Trooper," and "Super Trooper" is one of my least favourite ABBA songs, and it was their last number one. It's kind of one of those ones that hovers between average at C and D, but I'm going to put it in D. And then to get towards the end of the year, we had the murder of John Lennon. And as a result of that, his single that was live at the time from Double Fantasy, "Just Like Starting Over," shot to number one. I really like "Just Like Starting Over." It's not perfect, but it is a great and enjoyable Lennon song. It's definitely got a pastiche of like, I think, Motown. I could be wrong, but I have heard that it's supposed to be a deliberate pastiche of a style. I'm putting it in A tier to join Start. And finally, we reached the end of 1980. We've had no travesties. This means this was a pretty good year for number one singles until Christmas. And "There's No One Quite Like Grandma" by the St Winifred's Girls' School Choir. Now, it is a travesty. It's a horrible song. It's a horrible performance. But it is... I have got some affection for it because I did buy it from my grandmother, who's no longer with us. And I've got that lovely memory of that. However, it is unquestionably horrible. That concludes 1980. So I'm just going to have a quick look on the chat to see if we've got any comments from people. So, hi to Pop Optic. The tubes were in Xanadu. Do keep commenting. So, hello from Southern California. That means it's midday over there. So, thank you for joining in what I'm guessing must be your lunch hour. I really appreciate that. Should we move into 1981? It took us 13 minutes from start kicking off to get to the end of 1980. It's by far the year with the most number one singles to contend with. There's some years where there's a lot less. So into 1981, and we're back with Lennon. And Imagine hit number one. It wasn't a re-release. It had never been deleted, but the demand for it as a result of Lennon's murder just went through the roof. And so Imagine, after originally being released in 71 and then released as a single for the first time in 1975 to promote the Shaved Fish compilation, finally hit number one nearly 6 years later. And as a result, obviously, of his murder. It was there for a whole month, for 4 weeks. I don't love Imagine, unlike many other people. And if I was feeling a bit in a grumpy mood, it would sit here in C. But I'm in a good mood today. I may move it later on. I'm going to pop it in B because it is a timeless song. It's just so overdone. John Lennon then replaced himself at number one in the UK with "Woman" from Double Fantasy. Comfortably, for me, the best track on Double Fantasy. And personally, I think is the best track on the best single Lennon ever released. I absolutely love "Woman." And it's 1981's first entry in the outstanding column because it's a perfect song. I think it's John's greatest song as a solo artist. I think "Woman's" fantastic. We nearly had a triptych of Lennon songs reaching number one one after each other, but it was broken up by another song that it's Joe Dolce's "Shut Up Your Face." I think this was a hit over in America as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a questionable song, and yeah, Joe Dolce, "Shut Up Your Face." It spent 3 weeks at number one in the UK, famously stopping Vienna by Ultravox reaching number one, and for that reason alone, I'm actually putting it in E tier because I really don't like Vienna. I never have. So that stopping Vienna getting to number one and becoming a pop music trivia quiz question is worthy of it getting into the E tier and not travesty. And now we are back with a Lennon song, and it's Roxy Music's Soul UK number one, and it's Jealous Guy. Jealous Guy is. I'm going to put it in A tier because I think the song is outstanding, but it is a cover. It's a beautifully done cover, but I'd probably still rather listen to Lennon's own version of the Imagine album. But Jealous Guy, A tier. In case you're wondering, I have previously ranked all of these on a spreadsheet, which I printed out, and I'm working from this, and so I occasionally lose where I'm at on this and what I've said about them. Next track, Shakin' Stevens, "This Old House," a cover. However, This Old House led to me buying one of my first ever albums, which was a compilation called Rock House, because it was on it, and I wanted a copy of This Old House. It's not anything better than B tier, but for a cover, it's a great cover. It's better than Rosemary Clooney's original. The next track, we're back with Eurovision. So for 3 years running, the Eurovision winner reached the UK number one spot. But this is, of course, the year that matters, 1981. It's Bucks Fizz, Making Your Mind Up. And I'm a Bucks Fizz fan. I've put out videos of... I've just seen the comment there. America like this novelty crap too of "Shut Up Your Face." Yes, I think it did reach number one there as well. Horrible song. Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz. I did a Bucks Fizz video recently where I ranked all of their albums, which surprised me by how many people who watched it. But Making Your Mind Up, it's totally mid for me. It's one of although it was the song that introduced the band to me and the world, and I'm a Fizz fan as a result of it, I think it's completely mid and I don't particularly love it. Oh, I think... Bear with me a second. Cool. Let me get my track back. So the next one is Adam and the Ants, "Stand and Deliver." Adam and the Ants were a great post-punk band. They're effectively new romantic era, but they had such a swagger and attitude to them, and they were a punk band to begin with. "Stand and Deliver," famously, "I'm a Dandy Highwayman." It's A tier. It's an absolutely great song. If you're not aware, if you've ever heard of Horrible Histories, they do parody songs, and they did one about Dick Turpin, the highwayman, that is so based on "Stand and Deliver" and is brilliant. It's almost as good as the original song "Stand and Deliver." Next one is Smokey Robinson, as in of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. So this is 20 years into his career. So the Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Motown band from the very early 60s. They had a number one hit single in the 70s with "Tears of a Clown." Great song. This is a solo one for him, "Being With You." He's still going. His last album last year was called Gasms. Work out what that might mean. I don't particularly like it. It sits in E tier. I wouldn't turn off the radio if it comes on. And likewise, the next track is Michael Jackson. And I think this might be his first UK solo number one, but it's a Motown track that they pulled out of the vault because "Off the Wall" was doing really well. And it's one day in my life, or One Day in Your Life. I don't like it, but I don't hate it. It's an E, not a travesty. We're back now with the specials for Ghost Town. And I've seen this ranked as often the best ever single of the 80s, and sometimes one of the best ever singles released. The specials were imploding and falling apart at the point that they recorded this, and I've got to agree about its status. It is absolutely outstanding. Ghost Town. Terrific song. Next we have a cover again. It's Shakin' Stevens and another cover. This one is of Green Door, and it's not as good. It was off the Shaky album, which I owned. I had on cassette, I think, for Christmas that year. Green Door, it's all right. I don't particularly like it. It's a D at best. Moving on to Annika with Japanese Boy, which could be one of the songs that, if you are been following the UK the charts, the UK charts for a while, this is a bit of a forgotten song. So you might need to go back and actually have a listen to Japanese Boy. It's all right. I don't hate it. I don't like it, but it's probably a little bit problematic these days. I'm probably in the E tier. Next one, we're into September 81 with Soft Cell's Tainted Love. Now, what can be said about Soft Cell's Tainted Love that hasn't been said before? Number one, it's a cover of a Northern Soul classic. It's totally mid for me. I like it. There's times when I used to really like it, but it became a little bit overplayed in 80s discos when I was at university. We're back with Adam and the Ants for Prince Charming. This was off the Prince Charming album, and it's not as good as Stand and Deliver, but only not quite as good. I really liked Prince Charming as much. It's an A tier for me. The next one is Dave Stewart and Barbara Gaskin with It's My Party. Now, this is a cover of a song by Leslie Gore. It's not the Dave Stewart who was in the Eurythmics. It's a different Dave. He's often credited as David A. Stewart to differentiate himself from this one. I remember being utterly freaked out by this on Top of the Pops and on TV because of those long fingernails that Barbara Gaskin had, and it freaked me out. It's not a travesty because the song's really quite strong. It's just that feeling means I don't like it, and it's an A tier. Next we have The Police with Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic from the Ghost Machine album, and I love it. It's S tier. I like the Police singles. You might see a trend here. They're not one of my favourite bands, but as a singles artist, they were peerless. And we're coming towards the end of the year with Queen and David Bowie's Under Pressure. Comfortably the best thing, if you've watched my previous video with Queen, comfortably the best thing on Hot Space album. But even then, it's not an absolute favourite for me. It's sitting here comfortably in B tier. I think it's just been overplayed. I love both Bowie and Queen, and I like their collaboration. I don't adore it. Next we have Julio Iglesias with Begin the Begin, and this is a Cole Porter song. As a result, and I'm very fond of Cole Porter songwriting, this cannot be a travesty. However, it's E tier. It's one of those, why did it exist? How did it get to number one? I suppose it was Granny's buying it. It's not a travesty because it is. It's a Cole Porter song. It's a great Cole Porter song. And finally, we reach the end of 1981 with Don't You Want Me by the Human League. Yes, I know that the female vocalist in the second verse is horribly off key, but it's Don't You Want Me, baby. I mean, come on. It's outstanding. I mean, it's quite a lot of outstanding songs in these first couple of years. So that brings us to the end of 1981. We are 2 years in. It's taken us 24 minutes. I just read the comment from Pop Optic. Hot Space pissed me off when I heard it. Shockingly not Queen. Yes, that is a very, very good assessment of Hot Space. likes Ghost Town. I completely agree. Adam Ant being a game changer. Um, the first kind of foray into the decadence the 80s would bring. Yeah, we are heading into new romantic territory. It took a while before much of it got to number one. Um, let's crack on, shall we? 25 minutes in, we've done 2 years, and we're now coming to 1982, and we're back with Bucks Fizz for the Land of Make Believe. So, I am a Bucks Fizz fan, and unapologetically, I adore this song. So as you can see, we've now got to the point where things are starting to drop off screen. I'm going to have to do a bit of bouncing up and down. But yeah, I absolutely love The Land of Make Believe. It makes me happy. It takes me back to being 6 years old, or 7, or however old I was when it came out. Absolutely fantastic. The next track is Oh Julie by Shakin' Stevens. The only one of the songs that he got to number one that I think he wrote himself. And I absolutely love Oh Julie as well. This is 3 S tier outstanding tracks in a row for me, and it doesn't stop because the next one was Computer Love, The Model by Kraftwerk. Computer Love, I've got the album Computer World. I really like it. I'm quite fond of Kraftwerk. But The Model is, it's a special song. Absolutely terrific. It's 4 in a row in outstanding. If you can imagine, I mean, there was probably a time I didn't like some of these songs. They have, as I've got older and got more into music, they have truly grown. And that Kraftwerk one's an example of something that's become outstanding as I've got older. Next, we have the Jam again. I don't know whether, like I said, if Matt's watching. There's 4 people on the call now, which is fantastic. But Matt might be wondering where I'm going to put this Jam single, as he's a big Jam fan. Town Called Malice and Precious, double A side. Famously stopped Golden Brown by the Stranglers from reaching number one. And personally, I'm quite pleased about that because I think it's an absolutely outstanding song again. And I don't particularly like Golden Brown by the Stranglers. There was some complaints apparently by the Stranglers record company that the Jam had kind of manipulated the chart sales. It won't be the first time this happens in the 80s or 90s, where multiple releases of things kind of skewed the chart slightly. But I'm glad Golden Brown didn't get number one because I don't like it. So 5 outstanding in a row. The next track is Tight Fit, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, which everybody knows. And I'm putting it in the E tier. It's broken the trend. It's not that it's bad. It isn't. It's just, it is a cover and a pretty ropey one at that. Next track that got to number one. We're now into March 82, in case you're wondering, if you're trying to keep track, is the Goombay Dance Band, 7 Tiers. Now, if you've watched my videos before, particularly my top 15 worst number one singles of the 1980s, it will come as no surprise that this particular piece of garbage sits in travesty. I detest it with all my heart. Appalling. But we're back with Bucks Fizz. Once upon a time, my all-time favourite band, because I was little, but I still hold a very deep affection in my heart for it. My Camera Never Lies, their last UK number one, and it's Bucks Fizz, and it's good Bucks Fizz. So hang on, how do I do this? I have to scroll up and then drop it where it deserves to be in the outstanding tier. Next is the maligned Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. In the UK, this was the first number one single for Stevie Wonder. It was the first number one single for Paul McCartney under his own name, not with Wings, and a lot of people hate it. I am not one of them. I actually really like Ebony and Ivory, and I have very fond memories of listening to this on the radio when I was a nipper in 1982. I would have been between 7 and 8 years old, and I strongly remember Ebony and Ivory on the radio. I do not detest it. I don't think it's either their best work, but it brings me warm fuzzy feelings when I heard it because it takes me back to that age. Next we have the third Eurovision winner in a row to reach number one. It's Nicole, A Little Piece. This too made my worst singles of the 1980s. I hate it. I really can't stand it. There's nothing more to be said about it. It's horrible. Next is Madness with House of Fun. Madness is sole UK number one. It's a great song. I'm putting it solidly in A. And joining it is Adamant's first single under his name as a solo artist, Goody Two Shoes. Great fun song, and I'm popping that in A. Where are we at? Next we have Charlene, I've Never Been to Me. Again, if you've watched my 1980s worst number one singles, it will be no surprise that it joins Goombay Dance Band and Nicole from that particular year sitting in the travesty section. I've never been to Me. What the hell does that mean? I've been to Paradise, but I've never been. Horrible. This was replaced at number one by Captain Sensible's Happy Talk. Happy Talk comes from the musical South Pacific. So it is obviously a cover, but it's such a bonkers and demented fun cover. I remember liking this as a kid. It's a B tier one for me. Then we hit one of the most famous songs in the world, literally, because it's called Fame. I absolutely have no strong feelings at all about Fame. I know other people think it's fantastic. It is totally and utterly mid. The next track to reach number one and was the best-selling single of 1982, in my opinion, deservedly so. It's Come On Eileen. I think the only way we can get there is... There we go. Come On Eileen, dance floor filler, 100% classic song. I believe this did get into number one on the US side, and I think, if I'm right, they're kind of viewed as a one-hit wonder over in America because that's pretty much all anybody knew about them was Come On Eileen. But what a great song. Next we have Survivors, Eye of the Tiger from Rocky 3. This spent 4 weeks at number one. It's come up in videos that I've talked about before in the fact that it kept a couple of really good other UK songs off the number one spot. I mean, it deserved to be a number one, but it's in that mid category for me. Next, we have something that my US viewers that are on this call will probably not know anything about. Musical Youth and the track Past the Duchy. This was trailed heavily on UK TV, particularly on Blue Peter, which is a kids' TV show. And they came from Birmingham. I'm also from Birmingham. But please do not hold against Birmingham the fact that Musical Youth existed, because Past the Duchy, I hated it then and I hate it just as much now. Again, made my top 15 worst number ones of the 1980s, and yet so many other great songs that were outstanding in 82. It's a real mixed bag of a year singles wise for me. So many outstandings and so many terrible travesties. Next we have Culture Club with Do You Really Want to Hurt Me. Better Was to Come. It's totally mid. Eddie Grant, I Don't Want to Dance. I vaguely remember this when I was a kid as well. It's sitting in the D tier. It's just above that. I tolerate it. I like it enough. And then finally, we have got the last Jam single, Beat Surrender. This is... I have no recollection of this from 1982 until I then ended up with the Best of the Jam on CD. It was the first place I ever heard it. I don't think it was their best send-off, but it's a decent enough song. I'd much rather have seen something like The Bitterest Pill I Ever Had to Swallow hit the number one spot, which is absolutely terrific. Beat Surrender, it's midish. And then we finally finish off 1982 with Rene and Renato, Save Your Love. Again, this is the fifth 1982 track that is total and utter travesty and was on my worst songs of number one singles of the 80s. It's what a mixed bag of a year. I look back on 82 with a lot of fondness, but with at the same time some pure crud that hit the number one spot. So that includes 1982. That one was a little bit quicker. It took just over 10 minutes. So let's have a look at the comments. Good to see that you are there, Matthew. Or I should say Matt. Wouldn't ever call you Matthew normally. When has off-key ever really mattered? The Human League opened this stuff in America. Yes, I guess they did. The whole electronic music wave and heading into the new romanticism. The basicness of Kraftwerk mesmerised me. Oh yes, I can understand that. It's stuff like Showroom Dummies and the Hall of Mirrors and Autobahn. When I'm in the right mood, I absolutely love a Kraftwerk album. They are. I was right. Dexy's a one-hit wonder over in the US. You have heard Musical Youth. It did cross the Atlantic. I can only apologise. Please don't hold Birmingham account for that. And your wife's Matt, your wife's auntie used to babysit one of Musical Youth. Oh, couldn't you have? What a shame they couldn't put them off. So we're into 1983. We've managed to cover 3 years of the 10 that we're going through. It's amazing that you're still with me. So into 1983, and we kick off with a cover version of You Can't Hurry Love, the Supreme song by Phil Collins from the album No Jacket Required. It's basically a complete and utter straight cover, but with a bloke singing it. I remember loving this when I was a kid. And if it comes on, I thoroughly enjoy it. I know it's a cover and I should be marking it down, and that's possibly what takes it away. As a song, it's an outstanding tier song, but it is a cover. But it's such a good cover that it sits happily there for me in the B tier. We're moving on now to a truly iconic song. It's Down Under by Men at Work. I know this was a number one hit as well in America, and I think deservedly so for both sides of the Atlantic. So it is, for me, Down Under is an outstanding song. You know, they got sued over it for that usage of the Kookaburra Sits in the Old Gum Tree melody. They got sued over that about a decade ago. Don't get me started on whether or not songs were original or not. Moving on from the brilliant Men at Work, we have Kajagoogoo, Too Shy. Now, I don't know, again, whether or not this will have been a hit over America, but it was part of perhaps of the second British invasion. They were in that vein of things like the Human League and Flock of Seagulls and all that kind of stuff. But Too Shy, I've got on my list here, I put it on E, but I think that's being a bit mean to it. It's a D. It's one of those ones that I'd happily listen to it. I wouldn't be changing the radio station. Actually, know what? That's what I said E was. It's an E. Next, we have the sole UK number one from the Thriller album, the best-selling album in the world. It's Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. It's an iconic song for sure, but it is only a B for me. I know other people would put it higher. There's better Michael Jackson songs. There are worse Michael Jackson songs as well, obviously. But Beat It, well, not Beat It. Beat It I'd be putting above it. Billie Jean's a B. Still strong. Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart is next. And I know I did a Jim Steinman video, which is still my most watched video, the tribute to Jim Steinman. And I know I placed this pretty high up on that list. I can't remember exactly where, because it is... bear with me. It is an S tier song. I absolutely I put it in outstanding. I'm just going to reduce my view on the computer a little bit. There we go. That should make life a little bit easier. So yeah, Total Eclipse of the Heart. I think again, big hit in the US. Next we have Duran Duran, their first UK #1 with Something I Should Know. There's a lot of Duran Duran songs I like, but Is There Something I Should Know is exactly mid. It is pretty much the definition of averagely acceptable. There's better Duran Duran stuff out there and better Duran Duran stuff to come. This is Something I Should Know. It's totally mid. Next we have David Bowie's Let's Dance. It's no Ashes to Ashes, but it is still really good. I really enjoy it when I hear it. It's a B tier. Next we have Spandau Ballet's True. Take your seaside arms and write the next line. Where would you put True? It's a B tier again for me. Next we have New Edition and Candy Girl. So New Edition were a band that featured the now much more famous Bobby Brown. This is what the first song on this list that I had no recollection of whatsoever and decided I needed to listen to before I made this tier list. All I can say is I wish I never had. I loathed it. I really, really disliked it. The next one is Every Breath You Take by The Police, and it's outstanding. This is another one of those iconic songs. If I didn't put it outstanding, it would be purely because it has been it's got a life outside its existence. I mean, obviously sampled for I'll Be Missing You by Puff Daddy and Faith Evans. And so it's allegedly one of the 10 most lucrative songs on the planet. I saw a video with that. They made it sting a whopping amount of money. But yeah, it is an outstanding song. It's a shame they imploded as a band and fell out with each other. Next is Rod Stewart with Baby Jane. A bit of a forgotten song because it's surprising to know that this was Rod Stewart's 6th UK #1 and last, because it's just kind of been completely forgotten about. So there's a reason for that, and it's not wonderful. It's fine. It's a B tier song, I think. Next we have a cover. Whenever I Lay My Hat, That's My Home by Paul Young. Now I very strongly remember this as a kid getting to #1. I had the No Parlay album as a result of this. That said, I've since heard Marvin Gaye's original, which knocks it into a complete and utter cocked hat. As a result, it's probably C. I think I've got on my list here it's D, but I do love the song, and I think that's what probably pulls it up a little bit. We're in August '83, in case you're wondering. KC and the Sunshine Band, Give It Up. I had this on one of those like Telstar type compilations. It's D. It's just below bang average. It's enjoyable enough when I hear it. Next we've got UB40, Red Red Wine. The song is written by Neil Diamond, and the song is, I think the song's all right, but I have this irrational loathing of UB40. Or is it rational? You can decide that. It grates. It freaking grates. And the song would at least get it into E tier, but my irrational loathing of UB40 puts it into travesty territory. I probably like UB40 ever so slightly more than I like Coldplay. And we hit into September '83 for 6 weeks, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. And best-selling single of this year. And again, it's another iconic song. I really, really like it. So we're going to have to drop this into outstanding. We've got a lot of songs in outstanding. I do often defend that the 80s were not a bad time for music, despite what other people say. Um, Absolutely banging singles in the 80s. Um, Next is Billy Joel's Uptown Girl from the An Innocent Man album, which is his tribute to the music he grew up listening to in the 60s. This, I think, is supposed to be a pastiche of the Temptations. It was later taken to number one a second time by Westlife. However, I can't hold that against what a good song it is. The fact that Westlife have got anything to do with it, because it's an A-tier song. I really enjoyed singing along in Uptown Girl. And lastly, we're at the end of 1983 with an a cappella song called Only You by the Flying Pickets. Now, Only You is an outstanding tier song when it was done by Yazoo. The a cappella version, I really dislike. It's not that they sing it badly. I think it's just, it annoyed me. And I remember being annoyed by it at the time, that Only You was only a year previously and stalled at number 2, but this second-rate version got to number 1 instead. I mean, well done to Vince Clarke for getting a number 1 as a writer, but it's a travesty song for me. Plus, it stopped, and this is why it's a travesty, because I am a fickle man. It stopped My Oh My by Slade reaching the number 1 spot in the UK, and I love Slade. I'm going to do, particularly if there's any interest in it, I'm going to do some Slade rankings over the in the future on this channel, either their singles or their albums, or just do my tracks of the years of Slade, because I'm really fond of Slade, and My Oh My was a great song. Would have been a deserved number 1 for me, because what stopped it is just a travesty. So that concludes 1983. So I'm going to have a quick look in the comments here and see what's going on. So Pop Optic says, I grew up near LA and we had a radio station, KROQ. Was it radio station Croc? Is that how they pronounced it? That played New Wave. We had lots of import shops. So every Friday I hit Hollywood when the imports arrived and feasted. My first. Oh, I think I've got the first utter disagreement here. True is a classic. How dare you? Yay! Controversy at last. That's really funny. Karma Chameleon was a fashion-changing video in the US. And yes, Only You did not make number 1 spot by Yazoo. Was it? Do let me know. Did it make the number 1 spot in the US? Because that would be nice to know. I've got both Yazoo albums. One of the things I'm currently doing is I'm turning 50 this year, and one of my challenges is to listen to every single one of my vinyl records. I have something like 480 of them, and that includes comedy albums. I'm going to listen to every single one of them in the course of this calendar year. So both Yazoo albums will be on my turntable at some point during the year. 1984. So, kicking off 1984, it was released in 83, but reached the number 1 spot with one of the best videos ever made, in my opinion. It's Pipes of Peace by Paul McCartney. You have watched my channel, you know I'm a Paul McCartney fan, folks. And if you've watched any of my other rankings of the of McCartney stuff, particularly of the Pipes of Peace album or the singles rankings, I rate it really highly. I absolutely adore Pipes of Peace. I think it is one of his very best ever songs, let alone singles. And I have really strong memories of it when it got to number 1. And my grandma saying, "Oh, you don't like him, do you? He's a naughty boy. He does drugs," because he'd just been busted for cannabis smuggling. Which actually, interesting story. Say 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 was released in the US and reached the number 1 spot, which was the duet with Michael Jackson, and I think is Michael Jackson's biggest selling song over in the US. And they were going to release The Man from the Pipes of Peace album as a 3rd single to kind of capitalise on the fact that a single had reached number 1 from the album on both sides of the Atlantic, different single. and it got cancelled as a result of that drugs bust. That Michael did not want to be associated with it. Interesting. So the man got cancelled. It's probably a good thing because I don't think it would have been a massive hit. But then, hey, Michael Jackson was on fire at that point. Now we reach Relax, one of the most controversial singles of the 1980s. It was banned as a result of Mike Reid on Radio 1. It's universally loved by everybody except me. I thoroughly hate Relax. It's a travesty song for me. You will disagree. Many of you will disagree, but I cannot stand Relax. It's interesting to note that when they heard the version that Trevor Horn made of Relax, of their original song, they said, the band themselves said that they were barely on it. Maybe Holly Johnson's vocals, and that was about it. There was hardly anything of the actual band on. Shuddering, massive travesty. Next we have a German band, Nina. I don't know whether this was a hit in the US. 99 Red Balloons, or as it was in German, 99 Luftballon. The balloons were not red in German because they've got more syllables than we have in their words. But for the UK market of their rewriting, they made the balloons red so that it would still fit the lyrics. I don't know what Nina ever did after that. Bit of a one-hit wonder, but it's a good enough song. I think it's a B tier. Next is... Ooh. Am I on the right page? Yes. I feel like I've missed a page. Bear with me, folks. That's all right. I can carry on. I think I know where I put these. Next one is We Are the World. That's out of position. That's why. That's why. It's out of position. Some 1985 things have invaded 1984 on my next run here, so you know what's coming up soon. I might even edit that out in the actual proper version. Say, another one of your worst songs ever. Oh. Can I just say I kind of agree with you. I don't love Say. It was number 2 in the UK. Great video, but perhaps a little problematic now. Because we move on to Lionel Richie and Hello, the absolute mega hit. It's C tier for me. It's become a meme, hasn't it? Hello, is it tea you're looking for? Written on mugs and things. Next up is The Reflex, Duran Duran's second UK number 1. This is the much better single in my opinion. I had got it on my list in B tier, but I think The Reflex is an A tier song. Massively remixed from the original version. And one of the few times where I think a remix, I can actually see what the point of it was. Next we have Wham! Wham's first UK number 1 with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. It's A tier as well. I think it's on a par with The Reflex. I think that was a like-for-like replacement at the top there. And we're back with Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Two Tribes. This was a number 1 in the UK for 9 weeks. To my knowledge, nothing had stayed at the top in the UK for as long as that since Mull of Kintyre broke all singles records at the time in 1977-78. So 9 weeks in the summer of 84. And much like Relax, I hate it. Had a great video with I think it was a Gorbachev character and a Reagan character having a fight, but that was kind of done better by the Clash on Sandinista. Ivan the Terrible and G.I. Joe, I think the song was called. I don't like Two Tribes. Sorry, it's a travesty song for me. Sorry to all of you people who love Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Next we have Careless Whisper, the biggest slow dance floor filling song of the 1980s, bar none. Referenced in things like Ben Elton's stand-up that Men Won't Dance at the Disco, but then suddenly they put Careless Whisper on, they'll grab the girl and they'll dribble in her ear. Um, it's just a bit, for me, it's totally mid. It's a C tier song, which is great because it now makes it even harder for me to see everything I'm doing on the screen. Um, Next up, Stevie Wonder's sole UK #1 single as a solo artist for I Just Called to Say I Love You. Now, I saw Pop Optic's comment about he can't do Ebony and Ivory. I'd love to know what you think about this particular piece of garbage. I Just Called to Say I Love You. Oh, I just wish he hadn't called. So many better Stevie Wonder songs that didn't make it to the top. Why that one did, and for what was it, 6 weeks. So 1984 is not shaping up to be a year I'm particularly loving, I have to say. Moving on from that, we have Wham! Freedom. I really quite like Freedom. I think it is A tier. This is going to start getting really, really full. So again, I'm going to shrink my screen a little bit more. So I've got a little bit more playroom. I might have to do that again because we're only halfway through the decade. Then we have Shaka Khan, I Feel For You. I'm not fired of that. I Feel For You. I think this, it exists. It's probably an E tier for me. It's not something I particularly like, but I wouldn't turn off the radio or anything. Jim Diamond is next with I Should Have Known Better. One of those songs that I think people have often forgotten about. I remember this and I remember liking it quite a lot, but it's mid territory. We're back for the third time with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and this time it's their Christmas-ish song, or Christmas adjacent at the very least, The Power of Love. It managed 1 week at #1. It may have got more than 1 week, but I doubt it. I think their star was already very much starting to wane at this point. But The Power of Love for me is their best song that they released in 1984, but it's still only E. It does come on at Christmas, and I don't run out of the store screaming. I would do if it was Two Tribes or Relax. And finally, we reach the end of 1984 and a song that I think it had such a massive impact. It kind of changed music, and it's Do They Know It's Christmas by Band Aid. Now, I think Do They Know It's Christmas made US #1 as well, but of course it was for the Ethiopian famine. The song is all right. It's no great shakes. It was fast written, but the reason I say that it changed music is that this opened the floodgates for every charity single ever since. It became the UK's biggest selling single, deservedly so, but it opened the floodgates, and I quite like it when I hear it, but it's a Christmas song, a bit of a white saviour song as well. And it was the best-selling song of the entire decade. We are, as a result, exactly halfway through our decade jaunt. It's taken us an hour. So thank you, everybody, for being on. I think a couple of people have disappeared. I don't know whether or not it's going to stay. But you can always watch it back afterwards. I will try and make the remaining half-decade a lot quicker. Let's have a quick look at any comments. Careless Whisper was a baby-making song. And I'm not going to read out your next comment because that's I like Weird Al Yankovic. Anyone cool hated I Just Called to Say I Love You, which is not quite what you've written. So let's go on to the latter half of the decade. We're halfway through. We have tier listed 95 songs. We have exactly 95 to go because there were 190 songs got to #1 in the UK, so we're exactly halfway. I'm hoping this will go a little bit quicker. Next one up is Foreigner. I just call to. I'm not. I want to know what love is. Um, that's solidly in the D tier for me. Elaine Page and Barbara Dixon with "I Know Him So Well." Now this was written by Tim Rice and Bjorn Ulvaeus and Benny Andersson of ABBA, and you can hear ABBA's influence in it. Obviously, I've always liked this song a lot, and it's going in outstanding for me. Um, it's got the ABBA magic without being ABBA. Next up, and might get some comments and flames from people about this, was "You Spin Me Right Round Like a Record Baby, Right Round, Round, Round" by Dead or Alive. I know this is a very much admired song. I am not one of them. I thoroughly hate this song. Stock Aitken and Waterman's first UK #1 as producers. I look forward to your flames in the comments because defend it if you must, but I do not like it. Next up is Philip Bailey and Phil Collins with "Easy Lover." I always liked this song. I'm not a closet Phil Collins fan exactly, but I think he's got some great singles. And I do quite like a bit of some of the stuff from Genesis as well. "Easy Lover" I think is an A tier song. And we should now be back on the right order because the next one is "USA for Africa, We Are the World." So my apologies to my US viewers, but I hate this song. I hated it when I first ever heard it. I hate it now. And it's a travesty song. I understand why it got to #1. Don't get me wrong there. It's not a travesty because of that. It's just I really detest the piece of music. Next one is Phyllis Nelson with "Move Closer." It's an E tier. I don't dislike it. I don't love it. I've got no real strong feelings about it. And next we have 19, 5 weeks at the UK #1 for Paul Hardcastle with No 19. Weirdest single I remember from the 80s up to this point. But I rather like it. It's all about the average age of a soldier in Vietnam. 19. It's a D tier. It's all right. The next thing is "You'll Never Walk Alone" by The Crowd. Now, I don't expect anybody in America to have any idea about this particular single. You will know the song. It's Rodgers and Hammerstein from Carousel. It is owned by several clubs around the country as one of their club songs, not least, of course, Liverpool FC. But this wasn't done for Liverpool. This was done for Bradford after the Bradford City Stadium fire. It's You'll Never Walk Alone is a really stirring, emotional song, and there are times when I hear it that I can feel the emotions really building in me. Even though I'm not a Liverpool fan, I'm not a Brad fan or anything like that. But this is my point about how Band-Aid changed music, because we are getting these charity singles popping up left, right, and centre, and particularly the charity ensembles. And "You Never Walk Alone" is an example of that. But the song drags it into E tier because it's such a stirringly beautiful piece. "You'll Never Walk Alone." Anyway, moving on before I tie myself up in knots with Sister Sledge and Frankie. I don't know how big a hit this would have been in the US or not. I know Sister Sledge were much bigger over on their home turf than they were over in the UK. But Frankie, I remember being great fun. I had this on Hits 3 compilation record when I was a kid. It's a B tier song. Next we have the Eurythmics with their sole UK #1, "There Must Be an Angel Playing With My Heart." The Eurythmics had much better songs than this that didn't make it to #1, like "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This" or "Thorn in My Side" is an absolutely fantastic song. This was their sole UK #1, but it's still a good song. I like it whenever I hear it. And famously, of course, there's got a harmonica on it. And the moment you hear that harmonica, you know who's playing it. And of course, it is Stevie Wonder. Madonna's first UK #1 single. Now we're into territory where I know these were hits in the States. It's Into the Groove from, I think it was from Desperately Seeking Susan. That was her first UK #1. It's a third B tier song in a row for me. Madonna has got more great stuff to come. We're back with UB40. You've already heard what I think about UB40. And if you are right here, right at the beginning, you'll also heard what I think about Chrissie Hynde's vocals from time to time. Because this is UB40 featuring Chrissie Hynde covering the Sonny and Cher song, I Got You Babe. The previous UB40 song went into travesty. This is in E tier because the song just pulls it out of travesty. If I was feeling a bit mean, I'd probably stick it into travesty, actually. But the song is better, I think, than Red Red Wine. Next we have David Bowie and Mick Jagger's Dancing in the Street, a charity single from what they did at Live Aid. Travesty. And a bad version of Dancing in the Street, no less. Sticking with a link with Live Aid, we have Midge. Now, Midge was the lead vocalist of Ultravox. I've already mentioned them and been glad that Vienna didn't get #1. However, I didn't dislike Midge. He co-wrote Band-Aid, and he had a #1 hit single with If I Was. I really quite like If I Was. I think it's a solid B. Jennifer Rush, The Power of Love. I'm assuming this was a massive hit over in America. It does seem to happen that sometimes terrible songs get caught up by more than one country loving it. I placed Frankie Goes to Hollywood's The Power of Love in E tier, but Jennifer Rush sits comfortably in travesty. This was in my top 15 worst UK #1 singles of the 80s. Hate it. So slow that it's almost funereal. One of those songs that I would quite happily see buried with a stake through its heart. Fergal Sharkey next with A Good Heart. As part of my listening through of albums, I got a copy of the Fergal Sharkey debut album. I'm not planning on keeping it. I'm going to give it away to a charity shop. But the track, A Good Heart, that kicks it off, is absolutely fantastic. I really, really like it. And I was going to put this in A tier. And then I thought about it, and I thought, no, it's not. I think it's an outstanding song. Good Heart, written by Mariah McKee. The next track on the album is a song written by Benmont Tench, and is allegedly meant to be a reply to that because it's about their relationship breaking up. What was it called? You Little Thief. You Little Thief is even better. The sole reason to keep the album, and that actually isn't enough reason to keep the album. I may change my mind. On to our next track, which is Wham! I'm Your Man. It's B. It's a good Wham track. It's not a great Wham track. Whitney Houston's first UK #1, Saving All My Love for You. That for me, bang average. Don't love it, don't hate it. And to conclude 1985, we have reached Merry Christmas Everyone by Shakin' Stevens. This is one of my favourite Christmas songs. I've also played and sung this live with the covers band that I've been involved with, and I enjoy it every time, but it's not quite S tier. It's one of my favourite Christmas songs, but it's nowhere near a patch on something like Fairy Tale of New York. So we are at the end of 1985 with a Christmas song. So let's have a quick look at the comments. Yeah, okay, there's the first defence of Stock Aitken and Waterman. I tore at the dance floor when that played. Can't comment on Jennifer Rush. Sucked too much. Yes, very much sucked. And then I don't know if you've ever heard Celine Dion's version of it. It does not redeem it. And Celine Dion is a singer I admire. Um, and you love the chess soundtrack. Fantastic. Um, 86. Let's crack on, and then you can go back to your lives, which you could do at any point anyway. 1986 kicks off the year with West End Girls. Now, once upon a time, I had got this in the D tier. I like the Pet Shop Boys a lot. They've got a new album coming this year, which I'm well stoked for. But I started listening to the greatest hits again, and I realised just how good a song West End Girls is. And it nearly made S tier, I have to admit, but it's an A tier song, West End Girls. Next we have Aha, The Sun Always Shines on TV. I am very fond of Aha. Again, I'm looking forward to potentially doing some ranking videos on their albums, tracks of the years, their singles, that kind of thing. Their previous single was better. It would have been outstanding tier. That is, of course, Take On Me. The Sun Always Shines on TV was the song they actually got to number one with. It's not a patch on it. That said, the album Hunting High and Low, still one of my favourite albums of the 80s. Next we have Billy Ocean with When the Going Gets Tough, The Tough Get Going. That for me is D tier. So D tier has finally gone double ranked. I've been ignoring that for quite a while by the looks of it. Again, there's a Boyzone cover version that was done for Red Nose Day. I'm trying not to let that colour my opinion too much. I'm going to shrink the screen down a little bit more again so that more things can appear and I can do less moving around. Chain Reaction, Diana Ross. Now, I know this wasn't a hit over in the US because when Diana Ross was touring over in the UK, she had no intention of playing it, and it was one of her biggest hits. Written by the Bee Gees, of course, and she was told that you need to play it, and she did not. She wasn't ready for how well it went down in terms of the reaction of the crowd in the UK, because she just did not know that it was a huge hit because it wasn't in America. It is so clearly and obviously, when you listen to it, a Bee Gees written song. I don't particularly like it, but I don't put it into the E tier level. Next we have Cliff Richard featuring the Young Ones and Hank Marvin with Living Doll. Released for Comic Relief. So the Young Ones are an anarchic comedy television show. And I don't know whose idea it was to pair Cliff Richard and the Young Ones with a remake of Living Doll, but whoever it was inspired. It is a novelty single, and I would not be against anybody who'd put it in travesty for that reason. However, it is still Living Doll, which is great, and it is the Young Ones, which is also awesome. And so I'm dropping it into A tier. It cannot sit in outstanding, but I always liked that. Next up is A Different Corner by George Michael. It's just below mid. It's all right. Falco's Rock Me Amadeus is next. 1 week. I understand this stopped a song I do like from getting more, but I can't remember what. Go back and watch my greatest number twos of the 1980s, and it might come up in there. I can't remember. It's an E tier song. Don't hate it. Or completely hate it anyway. Next we have the Chicken Song from Spitting Image. We are getting into some stuff here where I can imagine my US watchers will have absolutely no clue what the heck this is. This was a novelty song from a TV comedy show called Spitting Image that involved puppets. And it is a pastiche of holiday songs by a band called Black Lace. It is regularly cited as one of the worst songs ever released or that ever got to the higher echelons of the chart. The writers themselves are somewhat ashamed. However, I like the Chicken Song, and I'm putting it right there in the middle in the bang average C category. Next up is the second time this song got number one, Spirit in the Sky. Originally Norman Greenbaum in the 60s. This is Doctor and the Medics version. I don't like the song. I don't like Gareth Gates' version with the Kumars from number 42. Also a Comic Relief single. So I don't like the song. It's also a cover. It's a travesty section for me. There seems to be something about 1986 and novelty songs. But Spirit in the Sky, it's pap. Wham! Edge of Heaven, their final single. And for me, their best UK number one. Just ever so slightly better than Freedom. And Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. But it's still A tier. I don't think they've ever had one that I consider to be outstanding, and certainly not Last Christmas. Madonna, Papa Don't Preach. What a song. It's absolutely seminal classic. It can be read two ways. Is she talking about an unplanned pregnancy when she says I'm keeping my baby, or is her boyfriend the baby that she's talking about in the song that she's going to be staying with? It's almost certainly the unplanned pregnancy, but it's such a cleverly written song that it could be listened to two ways. And True Blue, great 80s album, 3 UK number ones. There's another 2 to come from that, but Papa Don't Preach is just wonderful. Great stuff. Next up, Christopher, The Lady in Red. If you've watched my 15 worst UK number one singles of the 1980s, you will have no surprise as to the fact that this is going in travesty. However, it is quite possibly my worst ever number one single, with perhaps the exception of Crazy Frog's version of Axel F. As an actual song, I hate everything about The Lady in Red. I hate the wimpy vocal. I hate the song. I'd rather listen to every single album of Coldplay than listen to Lady in Red. Next up, Boris Gardner, I Want to Wake Up With You. This also made that top 15 worst songs list. It's a travesty. I hated it then. I hate it now. Next up, we have the Communards cover of Don't Leave Me This Way. I'm not hugely fond of it. I've actually got it on my notes here as being an E. I think it's probably just into the D category, actually. Best-selling single of 1986, in case you're wondering. Next up, Madonna, True Blue. It might surprise my American friends on here that True Blue was the number one single in the UK, because I don't think it was released as a single in the US. And it's been cruelly missed off all of her greatest hits compilations. Because True Blue is a lovely song. It's not her best by any stretch. But I'm popping it in the B tier. Next we have a soap star, Nick Berry, with Every Loser Wins. So he played a character in a soap called EastEnders. He went on to then be a policeman in a film called in a program called Heartbeat, when he had another hit single with a cover of Buddy Holly's Heartbeat. Every Loser Wins. It's fine. I think it's D. I was going to put it in E, bit like Communards, but it's all right. Next is Berlin, Take My Breath Away, which I think was from Top Gun. Again, don't know how big a hit it was in the US, but of course the film was massive. Take My Breath Away, it's the third D in a row. Next up is Europe with The Final Countdown. So my son was going to join me on this, but of course he didn't know most of these songs. But I went through the various lists and I picked out the ones that I thought he'd know, and I said, you know The Final Countdown, and he immediately started going da 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 da. So of course it's one of those songs from the 80s that is now truly iconic. It's not one of the best songs, but it is an outstanding song because it's the way that it lives on. It's The Final Countdown, for heaven's sake. It's great fun. Next up, we have Caravan of Love. We're into December '86 here. By the House Martins. It's a cover song, but it's beautifully a cappella, unlike Only You. You know, I had a go at that about a cappella. So it's not I'm anti a cappella. It's not that I'm anti version of a song, but I like Caravan of Love. House Martin's Soul, UK #1. I think it's B tier. And to conclude 1986, we have got Reet Petite by Jackie Wilson. So this was a re-release. It's not a cover or anything like that, but it was a re-release with an Aardman animation video, which helped it become a huge success. It spent 4 weeks at #1. It's Reet Petite. And Jackie Wilson. It's just a timeless classic, really, isn't it? It goes in A tier. So let's have a look and see if we've got any extra comments. As we've concluded 86, we have 3 years to go, and I admire your staying power, folks. Just the one, I do not do Celine Dion. Well, okay. I like Think Twice. I like her version of It's All Coming Back to Me Now. Sorry. Think Twice, by the way, written by Andy Hill and Pete Sinfield, who wrote Bucks Fizz's major hit singles. Fun fact. Right, we now come to the second song. Is it out of order? Hang on. No, it's not. We now come to the second song on this 190 song list that I didn't know before checking it out and listening it today. I had no recollection of it whatsoever. It's Steve Silk Hurley and Jack Your Body. This is apparently the first UK house #1 single. Move on. There is nothing to see here. I listened to it. I hated it. I didn't dislike it quite as much as some of the things I put in Travesty, but I still hated it. Shuddering there. Next, we have Aretha Franklin and George Michael with I Knew You Were Waiting For Me. Now, I might be wrong, but I think this might be Aretha Franklin's sole UK #1. Obviously, she's had many great songs. I don't think this is one of them. And I've actually put it in the D tier. Next, we have the re-release of Stand By Me by Benny King. Now, Stand By Me is an absolutely classic song. There is no denying it. It's an A for me. It's not perfect, but it's A tier. It's great stuff. Now we have a cover of Boy George doing Everything I Own, which was done by Ken... Oh, I can't remember his name. It's amazing that I won Popmaster on Greatest Hits Radio, isn't it? Because I can't remember the names of anybody. Boy George, Everything I Own. And I don't particularly like the song. I don't particularly like the cover version, but I don't think it's a travesty. Mel and Kim, Respectable. That's the next one up. That for me is solidly B tier. And Let It Be. Now, we're back again with charity singles with ensemble artists. So this was done by the Sun newspaper for Ferry Aid. So in 1987, there was a ferry disaster known as Zeebrugge, where a ferry a few miles out of port from Zeebrugge heading to the UK had the bow doors left open. It filled with water, it sank, and many people lost their lives. And Let It Be was released. McCartney's on it. However, it turns out that McCartney did not re-record his vocals for this. They just used the vocals off the Beatles version. Go figure. This should sit in travesty. However, Let It Be finally getting its due as a UK #1 single is what puts it in E. It's Let It Be. For heaven's sake. Let It Be was kept off #1 in the UK by Bridge Over Troubled Water. So I have no complaints about that because Bridge Over Troubled Water is a song I admire far more. But Let It Be. Fine. It's Let It Be. Um, Next up, Madonna, La Isla Bonita, the third UK number one single from True Blue for Madonna. And I have placed it in the A tier. I don't think it's quite as good as Papa Don't Preach, but I do thoroughly enjoy it whenever I hear it. Next we have, from the film Mannequin, Starship with Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. I'm assuming this was a hit in the UK. Of course, Starship was the reconfiguration of Jefferson Starship, which was the reconfiguration of Jefferson Airplane. So how you go from White Rabbit to Marconi Plays the Mamba, who knows. But on the way was Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. It's a D tier one for me. Whitney, we're back with Whitney Houston again for I Want to Dance with Somebody Who Loves Me. And I really like this song. It's been in our family. It's kind of gained something else to go with it. So my daughter, for a while, really liked watching the Powerpuff Girls, and there's a pastiche of it. I want to eat with somebody who's hungry. I want to share a meal with somebody. I'm popping it there in the B tier. Whitney Houston's best number one single for me. Yes, that does include her version of I Will Always Love You. I just like Dolly's more. Next we have a novelty single. It is The Firm with Star Trekking. I very much expect this was not a hit over in the US. It's fun but rubbish. It's an E tier. Pet Shop Boys' second UK number one single is It's a Sin. It's a Sin is in my top 100 songs of all time, or just outside it. It's outstanding. I think it's phenomenally good. It's a Sin. It's amazingly brilliant song. Next we have Madonna with Who's That Girl? And I find this possibly Madonna's most forgettable song. Certainly as far as being a hit single in the UK was. Didn't get onto the Immaculate Collection. It is on Celebration, unlike True Blue. Had it been on the Immaculate Collection, it might have been more familiar to me, but I do think it's her most forgettable 80s number one. Who's That Girl? I've put in E tier. We're in August 87, in case you're wondering, and keeping track with Los Lobos' version of La Bamba, which I think was Richie Valens' song. It is a cover, but it's La Bamba. And I'm putting that into the B. Now we have Michael Jackson and Cedar Garrett singing I Just Can't Stop Loving You for 2 weeks in August 87 from the Bad album. It isn't bad. It's not Billie Jean. I'm putting it into the D tier. And now we have the best-selling single of 1987. This song still gets streamed and listened to a huge amount because of Rick rolling. It is Rick Astley and Never Gonna Give You Up. 5 weeks at number one. It's a Stock Aitken and Waterman. Had this been done, I'd done this tier list maybe 10, 15 years ago before Rick rolling was really a thing. I think it would have just been a good song. But it's become an iconic song and it has to sit in outstanding. It's our first outstanding. Oh, of course we had It's a Sin, didn't we? Yeah. Mars, Pump Up the Volumes next. I'm not fond of dance music, so you can probably guess exactly where this is going. Pump Up the Volume. No thanks. Next up we have You Win Again by the Bee Gees. This was the Bee Gees' last UK number one hit single. They're only one of the 80s. And I really like You Win Again. I rag on the Bee Gees for being a bit over similar. So things like Woman in Love and Secret, whatever it was that they did by One True Voice, and Chain Reaction. But when the Bee Gees do their own songs, it works and it feels a lot more special, and I'm putting it into A tier. Next up is To Pow, China in Your Hand. I don't know if this was a US hit, but it famously kept George Harrison off number one in the UK. He should have had number one with Got My Mind Set on You, which was stateside a number one, but not in the UK because China in Your Hand kept it off. However, much as I love George Harrison, I'm not going to hold that against To Pow, but it is a B tier song for me. And we're concluding 1987 with the Pet Shop Boys again. This time it's a cover of Always on My Mind, which they did for an Elvis tribute record. And yes, it's a cover, but it's very different. And it's always on my mind that the Willie Nelson song is an absolutely gorgeous piece of music. So I'm popping it into C tier. It was the Christmas number one from 87. And let's have a quick look at your comments. Oh, I also hate Spirit in the Sky. I am with you, brother. Never understood the appeal. True Blue came with a perfume-scented inner sleeve, so it was released. It was released in the US then, or unless you mean the album came with a perfume-scented inner sleeve. Oh, we are on the same wavelength about Lady in Red. Thank you. You don't do Whitney either. Ah, yes, I do not do Whitney. I'm not into singers who turn one-syllable words into 8 or more syllables. Something that I refer to as vocalis histrionicus. Yeah, Celine Dion does it. Whitney does it. Mariah Carey. Oh, 8 syllables isn't enough for Mariah Carey. Yeah, I am with you on that. However, I've got to recognise just what good singers they are. And sometimes the songs they sing are absolutely fantastic. And To Power, just a blip here in the US. They were a bit more than a blip in the UK, but they did only have one real song that's kind of lived on beyond their fame, and that's China in Your Hand. 88. We have 2 years to go. Thank you for sticking with me. I've been enjoying myself. I hope you have too. Belinda Carlisle with Heaven is a Place on Earth. I never saw the first. All right. I remember people being absolutely nutty for this. We're heading into some. We're not going to put many things, I think, in the outstanding and A tier from 88 and 89. It was not, for me, a particularly great time of music. This is the point at which I was getting into the Beatles and McCartney and basically my musical awakening. Again, previous videos in my first year of doing the channel, I did the albums that defined me. And there's a lot of things that I was listening to at this time that are in that list. So, yeah, not a great couple of years to end the 80s for me. So what did you do? Heaven is a Place. Next one, Tiffany. I think we're alone now. Well, you're not alone because you're joining all of those ones in the E tier. Kylie Minogue, I Should Be So Lucky. The much maligned and mocked I Should Be So Lucky from Stock Aitken and Waterman. Except it is iconic and genuinely a brilliant song. It's just mocked a bit, but it is an outstanding song for me. And who doesn't know I Should Be So Lucky? Lucky. Next up was Don't Turn Around from Aswad. I remember it being a hit, but I remember not being particularly that fond of it. It's all right. Pet Shop Boys' final number one with Heart from the Actually album. I've said before I like the Pet Shop Boys. Looking forward to their new album, but this is not of the level of It's a Sin. It's comfortably sitting here in the A tier. Great song though. I mean, they themselves don't particularly rate it. S Express, the theme from S Express. We're in dance music territory. It's joining Mars. This is part of the reason why 88 and 89 start to take a real nosedive for me, is because this is where dance music starts to take over. Next up is Perfect by Fairground Attraction. I used to really like it, but it's not that great anymore. Um, it's a B tier song. It's actually sitting next to China in Your Hand. There is exactly the right place. Next up, With a Little Help from My Friends and She's Leaving Home. This was a charity single from an album called Sergeant Pepper Knew My Father, and it was done for a charity called Childline. Wet, Wet, Wet did With a Little Help from My Friends, and Billy Bragg and Cara Tivey did She's Leaving Home. Both songs are top draw stuff. They're the Beatles, of course they are. However, they are covers. Um, they are good covers, and the Wet, Wet, Wet cover is pretty decent. It sits in C tier. Next up, we have the Time Lords with Doctor in the TARDIS. Now, the Time Lords became a band called KLF, who you may have heard of. But in the UK, they released a song called Doctor in the TARDIS. Now, this song is based on a track by Gary Glitter. That's why I've just put it straight into travesty. If ever this song gets played, then I believe that royalties go to a convicted pedophile. It's a travesty that it exists still. Hey, flame me if you want, but Doctor in the TARDIS. And I'm a Doctor Who fan, by the way. He's just got to sit down there at travesty. Next up is Bros with I Owe You Nothing. Have you ever heard of Bros? They were two brothers, twins, Matt and Luke Goss, and a guy called Craig Logan, who was the third member. They were the British epitome of the late 80s turn of teeny pop, and I hated them. However, I Owe You Nothing is all right. Next up, we have Glenn Medeiros, Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You. Go back and watch that 15 worst songs video. It's in there. It's a travesty. Next up is Yaz and the Plastic Population with The Only Way Is Up from August 88. Now, this is a proper summer hit, and it's pretty much a banger, actually. Not quite worthy of outstanding territory, but it is an A tier. Next up, Phil Collins with Groovy Kind of Love from Buster, the soundtrack. Again, it's a cover version. I quite like it. I don't love it. It's bang average. And we are on to the final page of my notes. You'll be delighted to know as we approach 10 p.m. The Hollies. He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. I toyed with putting this in outstanding because it is a great song. However, there are Hollies songs that I massively prefer. If this had been the re-released The Air That I Breathe, which was released after this, that will be sitting in outstanding. But He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. It's an A tier. U2's first UK number one, Desire, from Rattle and Hum. It definitely is one of the more outstanding songs of Rattle and Hum, but that does not mean it's an outstanding song in this list. And I'm putting that into B. I enjoy it. I don't love it. We're back with Whitney Houston for One Moment in Time. That for me is solidly in that D tier. I find it a little bit forgettable. Orinoco Flow by Enya is next. It's the musical equivalent of Barbiturates. However, sometimes you quite like the musical equivalent of Barbiturates, and so I'm putting that into the D tier. Robin Beck, The First Time, the song that was from a Coke advert. Not the first time that a song from a Coke advert was a UK number one hit single, because of course I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing was a Coke advert. But it's just below average. And we end with the year with a Christmas single. It's Cliff Richard. He's back again. This time it's Mistletoe and Wine. It is a Christmas single. There is no denying it. And it was his sole UK number one under his own name, purely under his own name. And it meant that he'd had a UK number one hit single in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and would go on to have one in the very end of the 90s as well, which is an incredible record. So I admire Cliff Richard, but I don't like the song that much, and I'm putting it into D. So that ends 1988, and we're into the final year. So let's have a quick look at any of these comments. Bros looked as unappealing as possible. Very shiny. That's my memory of them. Have never gone through the UK 80s singles list, so this is very cool. Oh, thank you very much. Especially some of those travesties. Surprised to see so many number ones that just didn't deserve it. Interesting. I think that happens every decade. Maybe one day it'd be worth having a look at US number ones, but there's so many things on the US number ones that I don't think I even know. I'm not that familiar with Making Love Out of Nothing at All by Air Supply, which wasn't a UK number one. It was a UK number two the same week that Total Eclipse of the Heart was number one. So Jim Steinman actually had the number one and the number two at the same time. 1989. We're firmly into the dominance of dance music and Stock Aitken and Waterman. There are a few deviations from that, but not many. So kicking off with Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan, and Especially for You. Syrupy is the best word for that particular ballad. However, syrupy does not mean bad. I'm going to be popping it into the C tier. It's average. Next up, Mark Almond with Gene Pitney and Something's Gotten Hold of My Heart. The song itself, I think, is average. I like it enough. It is a cover. I hold against it the fact that it held Mike and the Mechanics' The Living Years, which is a stupendously outstanding song, off the number one slot, and was on my number two's video, the best number two for me of the 1980s that didn't make number one. But it's not a travesty, so it's going to sit there in E. Next up, Belfast Child by Simple Minds. Now, Simple Minds is one of those bands that they've got a Coldplay complex. You either love them or loathe them. And Jim Kerr was the Chris Martin of his day, I think. Belfast Child, it's boring. It's just really boring. I nearly put this in travesty, but I don't think it quite deserves it. It's an E. Next, back with Jason Donovan under the Stock Aitken and Waterman stable for Too Many Broken Hearts. I like Too Many Broken Hearts. I wouldn't turn off the radio. It sits right alongside Kylie and Jason there, appropriately enough. Like a Prayer by Madonna. My word, did 1989 need a song like a Prayer to hit the top of the charts, because otherwise we would have been in danger of getting nothing outstanding, because Like a Prayer is Madonna's greatest single. I will fight anyone who disagrees with me. It's phenomenally good. Yeah, so glad that got to number one. It really, really deserved it. And following up, replacing it at number one, was Eternal Flame by the Bangles, and that too sits in outstanding. I really like the Bangles. I can't say that they're a permanent fixture on my record player, but Eternal Flame was such a beautiful ballad. I had friends who were a little bit embarrassed that was their first dance when they got married, and they shouldn't be, because Eternal Flame is lovely. One of my top 15 number one singles of the 80s. Absolutely beautiful track. And funnily enough, when I did do the Ken Bruce's Popmaster, and I won, my 3 in 10 was to name three singles by the Bangles. And of course, I think I mentioned Eternal Flame, but I didn't have trouble mentioning 3 songs. I was well chuffed with that, so I won a smart speaker. So I have an extra special spot now in my heart for the Bangles. As we move to Kylie Minogue with Hand on Your Heart. It's not my favourite Kylie Minogue single. there was a time when I wouldn't have even said that I had a favourite Kylie Minogue single, but it's the epitome of bang average. It's a C. Next up, we have another charity ensemble with Ferry Across the Mersey. So this wasn't credited to an ensemble, it was credited to Jerry Marsden from Jerry and the Pacemakers, Paul McCartney, Holly Johnson and the Christians. And it was as a result of the Hillsborough disaster from 1989. I have ragged on some of these charity singles, but this is it involves Paul McCartney, so it's going to get a little bit of a pass anyway. But this was such a defining event of 1989 that I couldn't actually put that in travesty. It would have felt wrong. I don't like it. I don't particularly like the song. I don't think the performance is that great, but it's where it is for a reason. And it was Stock Aitken and Waterman again that were involved in producing it. And we're sticking with Stock Aitken and Waterman for another Jason Donovan single with Sealed with a Kiss. It's a cover version of a Brian Hyland song, and it's all right. It's just below bang average. Then we have Back to Life, Back to Reality, or However Do You Want Me by Soul to Soul. And I remember being surprised by the fact that I actually quite liked this when it came out in the 80s. It's in C tier for me. Next up, back with Stock Aitken and Waterman for Sonia with You'll Never Stop Me Loving You. This is the third song on this list that I had to go back and listen to today to make sure that I was giving it its credit and fair shake of the tail. Actually, it felt... I mean, it's Stock Aitken and Waterman. So Stock Aitken and Waterman. And it feels like the younger brother of I Should Be So Lucky. And it feels like it's a song that, quite frankly, they should have been giving to Kylie to sing. Because it is almost a carbon copy. As a result, I'm putting it in D tier. And now we reach Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers. I love a mashup. I think they're great fun when they're done well. But these are basically... They're a jukebox thing. And Swing the Mood, it's... I hated it in 1989. I was 15. I was discovering great music, some of which it was sampled on these tracks. I'd rather listen to the great music and not this. Hello, travesty section. Next up, biggest selling single of 89, Ride on Time by Black Box. 6 weeks at number 1, from September to October. I've got a feeling that I actually bought this. I remember thinking I don't like dance music, but this one I quite liked. A bit like with Soul to Soul, and that it's probably grown on me a little bit in the years, and so I'm going to be popping that into the C tier. We're back again with Jive Bunny for another 3 weeks at number 1. This time with something called That's What I Like. Enough said. Lisa Stansfield, All Around the World, 2 weeks. All Around the World and I Can't Find My Baby. Well, probably where you left him. It's all right. It's a C. 89 was not a good year. There was some great music released in 89, but it didn't make number 1. New Kids on the Block. I can't help but equate them with Bros. That feel to me, and I couldn't stand them then. I can't stand them now. Hello, travesty. Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers' third number 1, this time thankfully only for 1 week, and it's Let's Party. Now, this had bits of Christmas songs, which included Merry Christmas Everybody by Slade. And Wizards, I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day, I think. However, it's a Jive Bunny piece of rubbish. It's going straight to travesty. As you can see, that's been a bad end to the decade. And we conclude with a re-recording done by Stock Aitken and Waterman of Band-Aids, Do They Know It's Christmas by Band-Aid 2. So I've placed the original, I think, was in C tier. This is a Stock Aitken and Watermised version, which means it's far worse. The only artists that were involved in the recording of both were Bananarama and Cliff Richard. It has since been re-recorded a third and a fourth time. Once for that song, because it isn't a good song, was enough. I was going to put it in E tier, but ultimately we conclude the 1980s with, was it three travesties in a row. It may not get better in the 90s. So that's it. We are at the end of the 1980s. It's taken us almost 2 hours, probably because I have verbal diarrhea. And so let's have a look at the final comments. Bros looked. You mentioned that. Yes. Yeah, 88 and 89 were pretty damn uneventful atop the charts. The world was waiting for Nirvana. Maybe. The world was waiting. Yeah, there's some good stuff in 1990, but yeah, yeah, Nirvana had to change music again, didn't they? I was so on Simple Minds, to be honest, but Belfast Child at number one. How? My sister bought it. She was one of the people that bought Belfast Child. I remember that. Bangles, so underrated. Love a band where everyone sings. Yes. McCartney bias. Lol. Yes, definitely got McCartney bias. Jive Bunny was huge there. It was huge here, and we were deprived of. Well, actually, we weren't deprived of great number ones because they made it to number one. Because when I did that number twos thing, there wasn't anything that I remember standing out that was held off number one spot by Jive Bunny. 89 was a poor year, in my opinion. So let's just conclude by just finish off on a happy note by looking at everything I put in outstanding. So Coward of the County, Atomic, Going Underground, The Winner Takes It All, Ashes to Ashes, which is probably the best individual song on here for me. Don't Stand So Close to Me, Woman, Ghost Town, Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, Don't You Want Me Baby, The Land of Make Believe, Oh Julie, The Model, Town Called Malice, My Camera Never Lies, what have we got here there? Come On Eileen, Down Under, Total Eclipse of the Heart, Every Breath You Take, Karma Chameleon, Pipes of Peace, I Know Him So Well, A Good Heart, Papa Don't Preach, The Final Countdown, It's a Sin, Never Gonna Give You Up, I Should Be So Lucky, Like a Prayer, and Eternal Flame. That in and of itself, those, what is it, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Those 30 songs would make a pretty good compilation of some of the best stuff of the 80s. If you threw in the A's as well and made a triple disc, you'd have a blooming good time. So thank you everybody for who's been on this. If you stuck it out from the beginning to the end, you are a diamond person, geezer or gal. A fun 2 hours. Thank you, Pop Optic. I'm now smarter because of it. I'm going to end things there. Thank you so much for your time. And who knows what I'll do when we get to 250 subscribers. Thanks very much, and goodbye, everybody.